Hello and welcome to Unfiltered on SABC 3 as well as Channel 404. My name is Aldrin Simpier and I'm your new host. The question we're asking you this evening, to send them back to school or not? Tonight on Unfiltered, we take a look at a very contentious issue around whether pupils should go back to school amid the scourge of the coronavirus pandemic. The list of concerns are endless. Parents are grappling with whether the state will be well prepared by the 1st of June. Unions, on the other hand, are concerned for the safety of their members. Can the government plug the already existing gaps in the sanitation as well as the crowded environment in classrooms, especially for children in rural, township schools as well as poorer communities? Can children be relied upon to self-isolate? What about overcrowded classrooms and the lack of adequate sanitation facilities in some township schools as well as rural areas? Scholar transport poses another major risk for children when traveling to schools. How are these going to be managed? What about the lack of adequate sanitation and other facilities as well as overcrowding? Meanwhile, the Tavella Institute for Leadership, Education, Governance and Training and the African Institute for African Rights and Constitutional Litigation will tomorrow drag government to court to prevent them from reopening schools during level 4 of the COVID-19 coronavirus lockdown. They will argue that most of the businesses and employers are still closed under level 4 restrictions, which came into effect on Friday. Joining us this evening to have these discussions amongst our guests is Professor Mary Metcalf, an education expert, Bulisha Fenyane, the Executive Director of Tavella Institute for Leadership, Education, Governance, Training, Matekanye, the General Secretary of the National Association of Governing Bodies, as well as Basil Le Roux, the Executive Director of the Teacher Union, NAPTOSA, the General Secretary of SATU, Mokoena Maluleke, and the National Convener of the Congress of South African Students, Katlego Mokgejane. Please join us in this discussion on social media using the hashtag SABC News Online as well as at SABC News Unfiltered. Tonight's question is, what should be done to salvage what's left of the 2020 academic year? But first, let's look at what's topping today's stories. The South African President, Cyril Ramaphosa, who is also the current chair of the African Union, has called for coordinated, consistent international action in the fight against COVID-19. He was speaking during the coronavirus pledging conference organized by the World Health Organization and the European Union Commission. World leaders pledged $8 billion towards developing a vaccine.
This is exactly the kind of leadership the world needs today. In the span of a few short months, COVID-19 has spread to every corner of the world, infecting more than 3.3 million people and claiming more than 230,000 lives.
We already have early results from some trials of therapeutics, and several vaccines are now in human trials. The ACT Accelerator represents a unique commitment to work together at record speed to develop essential tools to prevent, detect, and treat COVID-19.
Developing countries are particularly vulnerable to its impact. We require coordinated as well as consistent international action so that all countries are sufficiently capacitated to be able to deal with this pandemic.
4 days into level 4 lockdown, and the concerns are that this new element of freedom could see a rapid rise in COVID-19 infections. The easing of strict level 5 regulations allows for some economic activity and more movement for citizens.
Government interventions meant to make life easy as the country battles the global pandemic COVID-19. The government eased the nationwide lockdown to level 4 to allow some economic activity, but it comes with its own challenges. The lockdown restrictions have been eased just one notch down from level 5, but this was purely to boost the already struggling economy. Under the amended restrictions, many communities still need food parcels to survive, and that means long queues with heightened fears for COVID-19 infections, especially when there isn't social distancing. It's just been a few days since the easing of restrictions. Only time will tell if this is a decision that will haunt the government when health experts assess level 4 lockdown period. Ntlantla Khatlani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Meanwhile, the Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane has come out in defense of the health MEC Sindiswa Gomba. There are now growing calls for Gomba to be ousted following her handling of the COVID-19 in the province. The DA is the latest to call for her axing.
There is this narrative created out there all of a sudden of the minister of the MEC to be reshuffling. They are just trying to exploit that. It's a political opportunism, and I don't think we need such kind of a behavioral pattern when we are dealing with a matter like this. When we need to reshuffle MEC, we're going to reshuffle her. When she fails to do work as per the targets and indicators that are made, that's not going to be an issue. She's been given a task just like any one of us. If I don't perform as a premier, there is no reason why must I be kept at a work that I can't perform.
Well, you can get more details on those particular news stories and other news stories at the bulletin at 9 o'clock on SABC3. But the discussion this evening on Unfiltered is whether the schools should reopen on the 1st of June as proposed by the Department of Basic Education. Joining us right now is Metcalf, Professor Mary Metcalf, who is an education expert. Also, a part of this conversation is the National Association of School Governing Bodies. We'll be speaking to Matekanye as part of this conversation. Let's start off with Professor Mary Metcalf. Good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. Looking at the plan that has been proposed by the department, do you think that all prerequisites are in place to have the schools reopen on the 1st of June?
I think that it's important that we understand that there is an absolute commitment from everything she said, making sure that schools are ready and to be guided by the readiness of schools. So as we speak now, I'm sure this program will agree that we're not ready immediately. But the officials were required to report to duty across the provinces today, and their work in the next month will be firstly to get things in place so that schools can return, and secondly to monitor that schools are ready for schools to open, so that parents can be confident and the public can be confident that the health and safety of learners and of teachers is every effort has been made to secure it.
There's also been this debate around whether the academic year of 2020 should be scrapped. What are the pros and cons of this? At one end, people would be saying that at least it means that the lives of the teachers, number one, is being saved, as well as the lives of the children on the other end. But what impact would scrapping an entire school year, an academic year, have on the system that we have now understood to be calling the education system, when every year we have thousands and thousands of people who graduate to the next level and those who move into universities?
I think as South Africans, we have to accept something in this period that's completely unprecedented in our lifetimes, and it's uncertain. What we know is that the virus is going to be with us for at least 18 months, maybe for longer. So I think that for us to think schools are out, everything's going to go back to normal, and then catch up is a wrong way of approaching the challenge. We have to first make sure that we take time for our schools to be ready, for everyone to be safe, for the new processes to be put into place. And then we have to understand that for the next 18 months, it's not going to be business as normal. We're going to have to keep on monitoring. We're going to have to keep on adjusting to new realities. So to say the year is going to be cancelled is a mistake. We as a country use every opportunity to make learners learn at school and at home.
Okay, we seem to have a problem with that line, but in the meantime, let's go to the National Association of Governing Bodies General Secretary. Matekanye is also part of this conversation. Good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. From the side of the school governing bodies, what's their take on these proposals that are coming from various quarters, including that there should be a scrapping of the academic year 2020?
Thank you very much, and good evening to everybody. Our position is very clear as National Association of School Governing Bodies that safety comes first. And whatever happens, as long as our children, as long as our teachers, school community is safe in the school, then all else can occur. Now, and really, truly, I don't know whether department by that time will be ready to open schools, in the sense that now, look, there are lot of non-negotiables. The social distancing, if one is just to start with, and you will remember we have been forever complaining about the infrastructure, the ratio 1:70, the township schools, in the poorest of the poor schools, in the working class schools, and that has been a war cry for quite a long time. Now,
but the DG, excuse me, Matakanya, the DG to Parliament said that what government will be looking into is to have a ratio of 1:40. Is that not satisfying?
We are saying safety first. Now, if it is 40, it's 1:40. We will not have a problem as long as these children are safe, because it has been said that the distance must be 1.5. Now, if you are saying, I mean, I don't know whether have you ever seen a class in a township school that it's not sufficing to accommodate 40 children, you know. Now, as long as our children are safe in that class of 40, we don't really have a problem. But that's what I'm raising to say, really and truly, I don't know, because our schools are overcrowded. Yeah. Now, it therefore means you need more classes to accommodate them. Because if I'm talking about 1:70, then it means there are 2 classes. Then you have to create those 2 classes. Because this is what we have been saying, that our schools are overcrowded.
Okay. We'll continue this conversation just after the short break. We will be joined by the South African Democratic Teachers Union, SATU, which on the other end is proposing that only grade 12s be allowed to go to school. And I wonder whether the concern that has been raised by the association representing the SGBs feel that this could be a probable conversation to be had around only having 1 grade that is allowed to return back to school, and also freeing up some of those classes. That conversation just after this break.
We are proposing that GAD 11 Hutle school management teams that would have been prepared by the first team that goes in. GAD 18, we start receiving teachers. We would have worked with teacher unions, because we have agreed with them that we will not, they've given us conditionalities. And we need at least 2 weeks to be able, or 3 weeks, to meet those conditions. So I'm saying from the 18th, the teachers have to come in and prepare on the proposed date. And we are proposing, as we said repeatedly, that we will phase grades. Okuchukuthi a high school, enabantwana by 1,500. Kuzoza ama-matriculants awu-100 phela. So indaba ye-spacing none doesn't arise, because we shouldn't have the whole school to themselves.
And that's the conversation we're having this evening on Unfiltered with me, Aldrin Simpion, SABC 3 as well as Channel 404. We'd like to hear some of your views as well. We will be in the next moment be speaking to SATU as well as Namtosa, which are representing teachers in those various schools who are expected to be back at school on the 18th of May. That is, if the plan that has been proposed by government does go ahead. But let's quickly look at some of the tweets that you've sent through. A tweet here from Rose, who says that no, we must reevaluate the school year, September to June 2021. Where is it written in stone that schools have to start in January? Tony says, I made this decision. My cub will repeat grade 12. It's not the end of the world. Losing my cub is the end of my world. Oba says, I personally think that this is not safe yet to open schools, since also COVID-19 will peak in September, according to government. So yes, it should be scrapped. Kelly says that definitely our kids' lives are more important than 1 year of academic year. Save lives, Mr. President, instead of an academic year. Okay. And you can continue to send us some of your opinions with regards to this conversation we're having around the reopening of schools, and probably some suggestions that you have, including that one that came in earlier on around the reconfiguration of the school year starting in June and going all the way into starting in September, going all the way into June 2021. What do you think about that particular suggestion? There's also been the conversation that was had and the suggestion that came from Professor Jansen, who had said that what should happen instead is scrap the entire year. SATU, on the other end, is saying only grade 12 should be allowed back to school. And we have the Tavella Institute that is saying that it will be going to court tomorrow to force the department not to open the schools. And the department has said that it's still open for some suggestions, including your suggestions. Let's quickly go to an ad break. We seem to be struggling with our Skype.
Since we closed schools on the 26th of March, we've had more than almost 50 consultations with different stakeholders. And in each meeting, we were deliberating on the future of basic education following the COVID-19-induced national state of disaster. And the main principles that have been guiding us in this engagement were first ensuring that as a sector, we contribute towards the lowering of infections so that we don't contribute towards infections. We also ensure the safety of our learners and our educators, but also we balance that around protecting the academic year of 2020 as much as possible.
Okay, we seem to be struggling with our connection to the SATU General Secretary, but in the meantime, we continue the conversation with Matakanya, who's representing the School Governing Body Association, as well as Professor Mary Metcalf. Professor Mary Metcalf, a question that we raised earlier on, and an opinion from SATU is that only grade 12s should be allowed to go back to school. Does this work in the interim? Hi, Professor Metcalf, can you hear me? Okay, we're struggling with that line as well. Let's go to Matakanya from the national, school governing bodies, representing the school governing bodies. Matakanya, looking into that suggestion from SATU that only grade 12s be allowed back in school instead of including the grade 7s, is that a suggestion that you think that would help free up the classrooms, as we just heard the minister speak about it as well?
Yeah, I think I really can buy that suggestion, because if it is only grade 12s, then probably all the negotiables will be achieved. Like, for instance, question of social distancing.
Okay, no.
Hello?
Okay, the line isn't good at all. Okay, so now we're going to try and go to the Tavella Institute in the meantime while we try to re-establish those lines. Then from the Tavella Institute, we are now joined by its executive director, that is the executive director of the Tavella Institute is joining us now on the line, Balushi Ifenyane. Good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. Starting off with the decision by the Institute to take the department to court. Why?
Good evening to you and the viewers. We believe at the Tavella Institute that it is not. We believe that it's not yet safe to be sending the learners back to school, primarily because we are still going into winter, and we haven't yet reached the peak as a country. And again, we have just started level 4 about 4 days ago. So we don't know the impact that level 4 is going to bring to the numbers and the statistics of the COVID-19 infections.
Mm-hmm. But then looking into the measures that government is speaking about, for instance, they're saying that only grade 7s as well as grade 12s should be allowed back in school. Don't you think that those measures must be measures that are welcomed in trying to mitigate the spread of the virus?
We do welcome the proposal for grade 12, given that everything that they proposing as far as measures or safety measures are concerned will be adhered to. And then with the grade 7s, we are not very comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Because we believe that the grade 7s will not be responsible enough to practice social distancing and personal hygiene. And again, these learners, most of them, especially in the rural areas, they living with their grandparents. So we're not just focused on whether the schools will be safe or not, forgetting that these learners, they stay with their grandparents. So any thing that happens is not only going to affect them, but it's going to drag us down and back as far as flattening the curve is concerned.
There was a suggestion from a teacher earlier on this morning who was saying that maybe what government should be looking into is study camps, the similar ones that we saw for grade 12s. Do you think that a study camp for grade 7s as well as grade 12s, where the kids live on camp and are not allowed to go back home for an interval of between 2 to 3 weeks, could be the answer?
My feeling again, I'm a little bit reserved on the grade 7s because kids are kids. You know, they energetic, they want to play. That's how they are. So I don't know the level of supervision that maybe will be imposed, but I'm still having a reservation.
Okay, just a quick one before we wrap up. In 30 seconds, can you tell us what the department told you in response to the court papers that you've lodged?
Unfortunately, it's our legal team that is handling that.
Okay.
So I'm not yet updated.
Okay, let's quickly say goodbye to our SABC 3 viewers, but the conversation still continues on the SABC News channel 404. We will be in conversation with Kosas, who is saying that if all the necessary requirements are not put in place, they will be pressing attempted murder charges against the department. Just after this.
We are saying our strength as a sector, if we have to save the year, our strength is in the classroom. Anything else would not be able to assist us to a very large extent. Amongst other decisions we took, like higher education, we had to postpone the May-June exams, and the 350,000 learners that were supposed to start on the 4th of May will now be part of the December exam. So due to the lockdown, we are unable to complete our preparations, which include the printing and distribution of question papers, the appointment of invigilators, markers, and the general readiness in marking centers. So the examinations that were supposed to start on the 4th of May will be matched with the November examinations. And a new timetable will be for the match exams will be communicated as soon as possible.
You're still watching Unfiltered here on the SABC News channel with me, Aldrin Simpier. We continue our conversation around the proposal from the Basic Education Department that the schools reopen on the 1st of June, starting off gradually. So, as the Minister has indicated, with grade 7s as well as grade 12s. Still joining us on the line, we have Professor Mary Metcalf as well as Matekanye, who's representing the School Governing Body Association. Professor Metcalf, the question that I asked you earlier on, and the proposal coming from SATU is saying that only the grade 12 should be allowed to go back. Is this a suggestion that you think could help amid this furore around having multiple pupils, including who run in the millions, being back at schools?
Alton, one of the problems I think that we're having uncertainty is that we're clear about what we agree on is that safety comes first and time is necessary to make the correct decisions. Now, what we need is a conversation, the idea of aid. Grade 7s back when schools are ready is a non-negotiable that the school is ready. I think has advantages because it enables the private schools to be institution ready. Schools must go back at some point, and institutions need to be ready because we are going to be dealing with the coronavirus for the next year and a half of children's lives. Let's agree. Have you lost me?
Professor, unfortunately the line is really bad. We seem to be getting a crackling sound that keeps on filtering through. Unfortunately, I think we'll have to let it go for now, Professor. But thank you so much for your time. Let's try off Matekanye is representing the School Governing Body Associations. Matekanye, the other issue that has been raised is inequality amongst the various schools. And one would imagine that when it comes to the higher quintile schools, the schools which can afford, that those schools may just argue that they can go ahead and they will have all the necessary requirements and all the precautionary measures being put in place and have all the resources, including the sanitizers, being available. What's your take on this?
I think the system of education in South Africa is a national matter. It is not a matter of the pockets of schools, the schools that are capable and schools that are not capable. We are saying all the children of South Africa must be able to benefit equally. Now, I'm not going to argue whether if schools do not reopen and schools that are capable then can open. We are saying the Department of Education must be able to address this question of education in Africa equally. And we'll be happy because if we are saying quintile 4, quintile 5, go back to school because you can observe the social distancing, then your children are responsible, they'll wash, will not change masks, then the transport is fine, and there will be no question of infection to all the children, then go to school. What do? Because these are just the same crop of children that if they the university, all of them, not part of them, then what do we do with the children have not written this year, and then what do we do with the children that have written and then going to university, and part of the children, the poor, I think, the poorest of the poor, the working class, the rural, the deep rural, they will. So I would not like to go into that, but I would just like to say, I wish the system of education in South Africa can be addressed equally.
Okay.
All our children are equally going to benefit.
Okay, let's bring in Basil Manuel into the conversation. Basil Manuel is representing Naptosa, is the Executive Director for the Teacher Union. Basil, what are some of the concerns that some of the teachers have been raising, or your members have been raising, with regards to this COVID-19 as well as the reopening of the schools?
Of course, the problems are varied depending on where people are. But people are worried about their safety. They are worried about whether the very education department, who is the employer, is going to provide a safe working environment. And those concerns are real. There are other people that are worried about their morbidities. And some of them are not over 60s. Then there are the over 60s worrying about some of the stories floating around at the moment that says they must come to school. And we are worried about the science that is based on. And then they are, of course, worried about their learners, those learners that may not arrive back, those learners that will arrive back and that may take the infections back home. So the concerns are multiple and very varied, but it primarily has to do with the health and safety of themselves, of their children, and then of the broader community, of course, because the children go home into the community.
Are they coming up with any solutions, or are there any solutions that you as a teacher union are bringing forward in saying that the department should first meet these conditions before the schools reopen?
When we initially met with the education department, we certainly put on the table a number of things that we called non-negotiables. And part of those were the health and safety of our teachers and learners and education workers first, before the curriculum. And among all those things was the supply of PPEs, the appropriate PPEs, the cleaning of the schools, the regular cleaning. But of course now, as we sit down and we think more about it, we start thinking about, what about the textbooks? What about the books that the teachers have to mark? If they tell us that this virus lives for so long on various materials, can we clean the desks after every group of learners has been there? Those are the issues that are troubling us, and those issues are the issues we put on the table. We spoke to the issue of overcrowding. Of course, that's one of our biggest issues, where some classes are still sitting at 70 and 80. We spoke to the issue of the water supply, because this particular disease is only managed with hygiene, with good hygiene. And if our schools, and the latest count is more than 3,000 schools, still don't have a stable water supply, how do we ensure that those children, those teachers, those parents by extension are kept safe? These were the problems that we've put on the table as non-negotiables. These things need to be met and addressed before we can talk about it being safe to return to school. So it's the risk assessment that we as NAPTOSA have demanded that we do.
Okay, let's bring in Mokoena Maluleke, SADTU's General Secretary, into the conversation as well. Mokoena, good morning, rather good evening, and welcome to Unfiltered. Some of the concerns that have been raised, as also raised now by Basil, is the issue around the PPEs. But what we've seen in the health sector is that although these PPEs are provided, we've seen that at least over 125 medical professionals falling sick and contracting the COVID-19 virus. How sure are we that teachers won't be contracting this virus, even with the PPEs in place?
Good evening, and good evening to your viewers at home. And look, it's fine that you say it's good morning, because I think we've got to do more as a country, all of us, meaning that we may have to work 24 hours to do our work. But I want to contextualize the question that you are asking in the form of saying, yes, we see our healthcare workers contracting the disease, despite the fact that they are given the personal protective equipment and so forth, which means we need to do more to ensure that we protect them and protect our communities. So now we're talking about the teachers and the workers that are there in our school and our children that are in our school. Yes, the conditions have been put to say before you can even think about reopening on-site education, you've got to make sure that preventive measures are in place. Two, you've got to make sure that the disease is now manageable. In other words, you don't have to be seeing these big increases on a daily basis that we're seeing. You need to be seeing it in the decline, and therefore you can think about on-site education. But also, is to really protect the very same healthcare system in your country to be able to detect, to be able to track. And in these instances, If the teachers were to be contracting the disease or the virus, and the learners and so forth, what is in our minds now is that how best is our system going to be able to track them on the basis of what Ntate Matakanye has already indicated? Transport of our learners. Is it still controlled? How is it going to be controlled? One taxi drops in 6 schools. One school is affected, it means it's going to affect all the other schools. So you close one school because one teacher is positive or 2 or 3 learners are positive, you are going to be forced to close the other school because that transport that is being used by the learner is dropping everyone everywhere else. Is the system going to be able to do that? So yes, we've got to say, let us have these particular essentials so as to ensure that we protect them. But clearly it is that it's not going to be like bulletproof. We've got to still have to do some training about how we take responsibility ourselves and ensuring that the plan that is there will afford us that particular opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, the plan that is there has not been thoroughly thought of. It has not been thoroughly engaged with, so that at least the public and ourselves are able to say this plan can be able to mitigate the spread of the disease, and it can help the teachers not to be infected. It can help the learners not to be infected. But in this instance, the plan was announced by the minister, and we were still waiting, sir, for the 11th. For the minister to come back to us and say, now I am ready, here is the plan. That is the promise we got on the 26th. Don't say anything, I'm coming back. I will never go to the public without having to come back to your stakeholders and say, we are ready, because for now we're not ready and we're waiting for that. The plan that they have is not a plan that you can rely on. Today, which is the 4th, principals are calling support workers to come to school to clean. And we have said, no, but that can't be the route. You've got to do deep cleansing or disinfectant at least. If you can't do deep cleansing, you have got to do disinfecting, sanitize the school. But can it be done by the people who have not been screened, by the people who are not trained, by the people who have got no capacity to do those things that are supposed to be done by health department or by the public health? And so I am saying, yes, whilst we have called for this, it's not that it's 100% proof, but because we know that at some point the schools have got to reopen, at some point we've got to continue with the curriculum and so forth, we need to be ready for that.
Considering that the rules of engagement have already been contaminated, as you put it, that the conversation that was supposed to have been had between the department as well as the teachers' union did not go ahead, does this mean that what SATU is also arguing is that there should be a postponement of the gradual increment or the gradual reintroduction of schooling?
Our position is that if you provide us with all the essentials that we have listed and Basil have made clear, these are the non-negotiable, then there is a reason for us to be able to say, yes, we've been able to meet the minimum as required. One, in terms of that you provide us with the mask, which you will also have to look at the social distancing, that we will not have to compromise on that. The 1:40 in the classroom, it is a norm that we are currently using. It is not the norm for the COVID. The norm for the COVID is to halve that number, okay? So if we are to be continuing and be phasing in your grade 12 and so forth, and then we look at how we can use some intervals at a particular point in time when we are not in the peak, when we can really, because what we are in control of, for that matter, is the calendar year. We are in control of. We can be able to realign it, to revise it in the form that will be able to say we can satisfy the internal assessment arrangement, but also look at the external arrangements for those who are writing the because they have external assessment, and you look into those particular things. But first and foremost is the health and the safety of our teachers. Okay. The work cannot matter while the health does not matter. So that can be that you're reminding us that it's fine, your work matters, but your health does not matter. Okay. I don't think so.
Basil, for your members, where to from here?
Well, look, we've now moved from the point where we put out on the table all our concerns and demands. Now we are monitoring to see that the department can deliver. As Mugwena says, there are so many things that have to be delivered on, and we want to know that before schools open, that we are going to have a safe environment. And that is why I'm perturbed to hear that there are people calling cleaners to school, and heaven forbid that some may be even calling teachers to school. That is plainly putting yourself in the firing line, because you will be putting those teachers and those cleaners in danger. And we will not allow that to happen. So we are now seeing and we are monitoring the department because they've made promises. Sorry?
Are you still going to court?
No, we never threatened to go to court on this particular matter. We've said that we would not hesitate to challenge an unlawful action. Remember, it is the employer's responsibility to create a safe working environment. And that safe working environment includes COVID. COVID doesn't suddenly suspend all those other laws that are there. So we want to see that those things are done before we say to our teachers, let's action to go back to school. Yes, we are part of the preparations, and we want to say our teachers want to go back to school. They are anxious about the children they've left behind, whether they be grade 1s or grade 12s, but they too have their own fears. And a number of them have fears that you can't even imagine. So we are saying, let's get this thing done. Let's get it done properly. And let us see that the entire system is showing that we are actually managing this disease.
Okay, thank you so much, Basil Manuel, that from Naptosa representing teachers. When we come back after this break, we will be playing some of the voice notes that you've sent through. We'll also continue the conversation and introduce COSAS into this conversation.
We have network problems, and even sometimes data to have it is a problem.
Another concern is me going to school because I use public transport, and there's a higher risk of me getting the COVID-19 virus while I'm using the public transport.
We had planned for next year we want to go to pursue our studies at universities. So the coronavirus came and stood in our way. It blocked our goals and dreams.
And with that, let's listen to some of the voice notes that you've sent through.
Good evening. My opinion is that we should not cancel 2020 yet. If they can open school from next month, but if not, then we could. Then the Department of Education can cancel 2020 because learners cannot do anything less than 5 months. They can't finish the syllabus and they won't be prepared enough, and in that extent will cause many to fail. So I think if the school are not going to be open next month, then we're going to cancel 2020.
The government must ensure that there is safety at our school. Masks are provided for each and every learner, and everyday classrooms are sanitized. Also, learners will be sanitized and ensuring social distancing. If there is no such safety, which means the 2020 academic year will have to be scrapped, because safety comes first. Thank you.
Hello, SABC. I don't think it's possible for us to scrap the academic year of 2020 because the lives of the children are already in play. Now, for us to just scrap an entire year of their life, some of whom are doing their matric, is not fair. It's not fair to them and it's not fair to the parents because they have put a lot of effort into this year, and for us to scrap it will just throw all of that effort in their face.
Okay, well, we've heard your voice notes. Now let's bring into the conversation Katleho Mawajana, who is the national convener for COSAS. Good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. What's your constituency saying about the reopening of schools?
Good evening and thank you for having us. First and foremost, we remain optimistic and hopeful for the future that we will conquer this demon called coronavirus. And our members are quite clear that they won't be going to school unless if there are protective measures and the department is able to preserve their health and their. Our members are saying they are willing, more than willing to go to schools. However, if the department is not ready for the reopening of schools, then we won't be going to schools. Number one, we must note that the department has been failing to deal with infrastructure in schools. For an example, there's a school in Tavella called Chabasima Gates. A teacher for grade R was hired, and on the 15th of April, there was supposed to be a container, a mobile classroom already. Up to date, there's no a mobile classroom. So we can already see they are even failing to provide textbooks for learners. That's why learners have to share a textbook. So it means that they won't be ready, but we are optimistic and we hope to see what they are doing. But it's evident that they have been failing to plan. And if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Katleho, you've also threatened that you will press attempted murder charges if the schools are opened and you find that there's a school that doesn't have the necessary requirements.
Well, yes, because if the Department of Basic Education forces open schools on the 1st of June without protective measures in place, it will be evident to us that the department is seeking to send learners to the grave. So it will be attempted murder, and we are going to lay criminal charges against the department.
Okay, let's just quickly bring in Mokoena into this conversation as well as we wrap up. Mokoena, listening into what Katleho was saying, some of the concerns, of course, being the issues around infrastructure and the promises that have previously been made. How sure are we that this time around that government will be delivering on those, including issues around having water available?
Well, as things stand now, we don't have that hope that the department will be able to pull through this particular plan. As it stands, the Limpopo government had already indicated that they are not ready to reopen the schools because, one, they don't have the resources to be able to put water in those particular schools, to ensure that there are sanitation, because these are issues of dignity, these are issues about life. So we are seeing one of the biggest regions in the Eastern Cape today. They have just also declared that, look, they are not ready. They are not going to be able to do that. However, they are going to reopen the schools because there is an instruction that is coming up there. So now we are seeing the shifting of the responsibility from the national government to the provincial government shifting their responsibilities now to the lower structures and saying, you as schools do what you are not supposed to be doing. That indicates to you that the department will not be able to really put this plan in place because they did not have time to really put their thoughts together and then listen to the experts and listen to the educators to then say, how is it possible for you to be able to educate under level 4 of these alerts? Because it is still a problem where the parents are at home, your children are at school, and therefore you have not taken into account the issues of the comorbidities like Comrade Basil has indicated, the issues of the fact that even if you are 15 years old and carrying an inhaler going to school, your child can die. So this myth about the fact that no, young people are strong, they will make it. The problem is that it's based on false assumptions. South Africa has been defined by an apartheid racism that has done two things. It had structured the opportunities, but it also had designed the value. So it has said to us, those who will be important are those who have got the money. And if they have the money, they will be online. And therefore, don't worry, they will still continue their education. Those that will put them in the rural areas there, they have got no value. Don't worry about their lives. Don't worry about their opportunities. So they don't have to have water. They don't have
those disparities still continue.
Other things and so forth.
Unfortunately, Mokoena, we've run out of time. We can't continue this conversation, but the conversation, of course, can still continue on social media. Thank you so much for watching Unfiltered with me, Aldrin St. Pierre. Do join us again next week. Good night.